final keynote, and so I'm inviting CEO of CloudOps, company behind all this nice event, Ian Ray. Please welcome, standing up here.
I'm very conscious that it's 5:05 and in Montreal we have something called a 5 à 7. And I'm usually the first one lining up at the bar. So luckily I brought two versions of my slide deck. Archie's going to try to get the abridged version up on the screen. So very briefly, what's great is I can skip all the obligatory, like the business slide and all that. We can get right to the good stuff. Basically, CloudOps has now have been very privileged for about 15 years, almost 15 years, to be helping companies succeed in the cloud. And we've learned a lot along the way. It's been a pretty wild journey since we, I think it was 2005, S3 was launched. And it really changed, personally, my attitude towards technology. Because I was like, for the first time, I don't have to be right about how much storage I need. Not today, not in 6 months, not in 3 years. And that was enormously transformative and something which has led to us being able to do some really cool work in the last 14 years. So how does that bring us to cloud native computing? All right. Like I said, I'm skipping the business slides. 3 lessons along the way. So unicorns and rainbows. I have 2 daughters and they're really in this zone, which is awesome. And I think when folks like to think of the cloud, and when the marketing people like to tell us about the cloud, this is what they're showing us. And what's super interesting, and I'll tell you, like CloudOps was very lucky to partner very early on with the 3 hyperscalers. We've learned a lot along the way. And one thing I can tell you is there's a very fine line between unicorns and rainbows, and a Death Star with a really strong tractor beam. So all that to say, we've learned a lot of lessons, and we have a few takeaways. And the first of 3 is open source software. What we learned, and this goes back a while, is that one of the keys to controlling our destiny in our adoption of cloud computing is open source software. And it was fantastic to have Vicky here earlier talking about open source from the perspective of someone who's been deeply, deeply involved in open source software. Kubernetes. We were working with open source software long before Kubernetes came along, and I've got to admit, we didn't start this, although, funny story, my CTO, Will Stevens, who I think will be arriving soon, pitched me in 2007 about what if we could use something like Solaris zones, and we would, develop software in a much more agile fashion and be able to operate it really a lot easier. And I basically was like, what are you talking about? Let's just use virtualization. And anyway, so it turns out he was right. Docker came along, and then Kubernetes, and I was forced to realize that I had probably stomped out the fire before it began, and then thankfully someone came along and did this. And now it's been 5 years, incredibly, since Joe Bida did his first commit to the Kubernetes project. And it's led to a hell of an ecosystem that we covered earlier, and it's expanding rapidly. But it's also led to this problem, as unicorns. We've got to figure out a way, how do we navigate all that? And so that brings me to our second lesson, which is we need ways of approaching this. And that's really led us to 3 sets of methodologies. Lean. So what do you do when you're not sure not only how to solve a problem, but you're not entirely sure what problem you're trying to solve? Agile, which is a bit more prescriptive. How do you iterate towards solving the problem? And then DevOps, well, what the hell do you do once you have to worry about day 2? Which hopefully happens, because that means you've been successful and you're in production. So DevOps has been a particularly interesting journey, and I'd love to say it's as easy as this. And it's led to some interesting, I think, cultural problems, because we, especially for those of us who work a lot in enterprise, there are very strange concepts of what DevOps is and should be. I've literally seen a company pitch me on, hey, I'm doing DevOps. I have my dev team over here, I have my ops team over here. What the hell? So, and then of course it became popular to think that somehow you could hire this really, really talented individual and they were going to solve everything, hence the unicorn. But that's led to, I love this. Pete's security guy. I mean, I think it's great to hear some security talks because it's so, so important. I mean, even once we've taken dev and ops and put them together in the same room without them killing each other, which is a feat in itself, and then we've managed to get past day 2 operations, and let's hope we're actually well into, say, day 300 operations, and we still haven't killed each other. There's still this problem, right? So we're generating a lot of things which are messy. And I think this comes down to this fundamental challenge we've always dealt with, which is there's a trade-off between innovation and stability. That's at the foundation of this, and that's not going away. And we all have to embrace that and deal with it. So how do we deal with it? I mean, a big part of, I used to think of CloudOps as a technology company, but increasingly I've realized that anything we do, we have to work with people, and a big part of our business now is trying to help folks row together in the same boat, in the same direction. A little bit easier to do when you're in a small boat, a lot harder to do when you're in a big boat. And I know many of you are experiencing that. So that's led to, finally, this realization it's all about people. And so this is not to pitch you or anything, but just show you a lot of our services now, this shocked me a few years ago, have become much more oriented towards enabling people to work with technology as opposed to helping people with the technology itself, which is actually super cool. Which brings me to the only point of me being up here today is just to say how amazing it's been. Years ago, we, probably about 5-6 years ago, we started investing a lot in getting out to meetups and then started sponsoring meetups and started organizing meetups, and that's kind of snowballed. And really the intent was just when we realized that we were dealing with people problems and not technology problems, we were like, oh, we should get out and meet more people. And that's led to this, a lot of meetups. But in particular with Kubernetes, what's really exciting in the cloud native community is that it truly has caught fire. And so whereas with a lot of the meetups we've run over the years, we're dealing with smaller communities locally, a dozen people, maybe 30, 40 people show up. Well, these are the kind of numbers we're seeing just in Eastern Canada. This is really impressive. Look at Montreal, 1,713 members. That's amazing. Look at the attendance we have here today. So it's clear that there's something going on that we all care a lot about. And I can't say I have the answers, but we're really happy to sponsor and help bring everybody here together. And that couldn't happen without all the other sponsors you've heard about today. But it also can't happen without folks like Archie. Archie, can you raise your hand? Where are you? I lost track of you. There you are. Can you stand up, please? So, big round of applause for Archie. I'd also like to ask Carol. Carol, can you come down here so we can see you, please? Really, this wouldn't happen without incredibly passionate volunteers who are not just doing this as a 9-to-5 job, or doing it because they believe this is really important, and that it's worthwhile putting in the extra effort to bring us all together. And I think it also comes from the idea that there's no way we can solve all these challenges in little silos, and we have to get together and work on this. And so I think today was an amazing example of that. For those of you who want to get involved, a lot of you are probably already members, but meetup.com is probably the best place to start. And on that note, that is my abridged talk for today. Hopefully I was less than 10 minutes, so let's go get some beers, get to know each other. Thank you for being here.